Okay, perfect.
Okay, please start.
Okay, we're so glad to have all of you here this morning. And today it's our honor to invite Brian here. Brian Wong is a Roja scholar and the founder of the Oxford Political Review, as well as the funding partner to a transnational geopolitical risk consultancy firm and the head of outreach and engagement for a France-based Web 3.0 startup. So Brian has written prolifically on the intersection of Web 3.0 and the future of the democratic and authoritarian regime and political governance. So today we are so glad to have Brian here to give us a topic about making sense of crypto, blockchain, and geopolitics, interactions and complications. 所以今天的主题呢，就是论加密货币、区域链与地缘政治的互动关系。我们今天非常开心的可以请到 Brian 黄来给我们做这样的一个讲座。在开始这个 presentation 之前呢，我们希望有一个免责声明，就是本平台纯属商业信息交流的平台。那么对于所有发言者的发表的这些内容、商业资料以及参与者的言论，平台呢以及负责人是不负责保障它里面的一些准确性、适当性、完整性以及合法性，所以不承担因此所产生的一切道德及法律的责任。那么所有参与者对本平台交流的任何商业咨询、商业行为、商业风险应该进行自行的评估和判断。那么凡参与本平台安排的 Zoom 视频会议交流的演讲者以及参与者，在进入会议及同意在视频会议过程当中，本平台呢也有权将对会议交流的讲者的主题内容、展示的信息、讨论以及参与者所有的言论、影像进行视频记录以及公开的发布。那么我们在开始这个会议之前呢，有几点需要去遵守。一个呢，就是请在屏幕的右上角 rename 那里加上你的证明，这样方便我们去沟通，因为我们后续可能有一个 discussion 的环节。然后第二个呢，就是请将话筒呢 microphone mute 关闭。那么第三个呢，就是主讲嘉宾演讲的时候，请勿发问。今天 Brian 也是特地留给我们很长的时间去进行一个 Q&A， 所以我想时间是足够的。好，那我们先請 Brian 给我們做一個 wonderful presentation. Brian, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. Thank you very much, GBX, for your incredible invitation. And coincidentally, actually, you share the same format as FTX, which is one of the largest crypto exchanges. So when I look at GBX, I think of FTX. Anyway, that's a joke. With all that said, what I wanted to do, sort of just for this first 10 minutes or so of our presentation, is to outline the basics of crypto, blockchain, and the possible functionalities and ways in which crypto might be germane to ultimately politics and geopolitics at large. Then I want to sketch out a few directions in which my talk and discussion is likely to take. So basically just broad sketches and scaffolding as to what exactly, the interactions could look like, the forms, the manifestations, the implications. But I don't want to go into too much detail for a very simple reason that ultimately I think it will be conducive or more useful if you folks picked what you wanted to focus on and just ask me questions about them. And of course, Mary, given her exceptional credentials and background, would be a wonderful interlocutor. So I'm very much looking forward to conversing with you, Mary, over particular questions that you think are of special interest to everyone else in the audience. And then finally, I guess I'll just wrap up with a few thoughts on trends and prognosis and trajectories for cryptocurrency, for more broadly speaking, decentralized finance, DeFi, so to speak, and finally, geopolitics over the next 5 to 10 years. Because frankly, beyond that, I don't have a crystal ball, not a fan of crystal ball gazing, so I tend to refrain from casting excessively unsubstantiated, of course, excessively sanguine or pessimistic predictions concerning what's going to happen decades later. I'm not that smart, I'm not that intelligent, so I will refrain from doing so. With all that said, let us perhaps start with, I guess, the so-called basics, because the question I often get asked, okay, is, Brian, what's the difference between blockchain, and, cryptocurrency, 加密货币? So in order to understand differences and the similarities between the two, the analogy I would often use is this. Blockchain is like the paper we use to print the cash bills, okay? So say you have a $10 bill and it's paper currency, right? The paper you use and the technology we employ to generate that paper bill, call that blockchain. That's like blockchain, okay? And then the currency itself, the US dollar, Hong Kong dollar, Canadian dollar, you name it, is cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency is essentially constructed through blockchain, but not the other way around. So blockchain is not a kind of cryptocurrency. Blockchain is not a currency. Blockchain is a technology. And how does it operate? I'll go into detail, roughly, I guess, a few minutes later. But effectively, it relies upon a system of constant, mutual, and shared verification of the same central block of data, of the same central block of what we call nodes, actually, or nonces, if we are to use the technical language in blockchain parlance. And cryptocurrency is related to and is built off, blockchain technology, but is ultimately minted and generated through intense computer processes or intense machine processes that produce a blockchain. So you might think this is all very confusing, right? And I think what's needed here is just some clarification concerning the machinations and also the mechanisms by which cryptocurrency is generated. So here's the explanation. Blockchain. Blockchain eponymously refers to, quite literally, right, a shared or a series of shared chains of so-called blocks, metaphorical blocks of data. You can call it data, or as I prefer to call it, encrypted or quasi-encrypted information. And essentially what we see when individuals generate blockchain is it is unlike any other form of data where you might have your own copy of I don't know, a story, an article on your laptop, and your friend has a different copy of the article, and then the 1,000 different copies across 1,000 different folks. The unique thing about blockchain is that it's shared, and that everyone that's contributing towards a chain is contributing towards the same chain, okay? So if we're connected, there are like 10 computers here in this network, hypothetically, then the chain is commonly contributed towards by all 10 computers, and there's only one copy, okay? There's not 10 copies, 100 copies, no, there's only one copy. And that is how you can authenticate and verify the authenticity of the block, because it's the ultimate sort of block that is the chain had always been there since the very beginning. That's how you know it's a bona fide chain. So it's impossible to replicate the block. It's impossible to suddenly say, oh, I'm going to tamper with the block and manipulate it and interfere with it, because of the unique technology undergirding it that is very power intensive, but is also therefore something that we can entrust. Even if there's no centralized regulatory authority, we entrust that this chain is real, is the real deal, and is not, faked or feigned or replicated elsewhere. So essentially, blockchain technology rests upon, complex processes of verification, of puzzle resolutions. How do you verify, right? You verify the authenticity by solving unique puzzles and unique mathematical problems that exclusively have distinctive solutions. So the resolution of that puzzle would grant the user who resolved that puzzle the right to add on to that chain, okay? So say I start off with this as a block, okay? If I want to add an additional, I guess, node to the block, what I need to do is to solve a puzzle. And after solving a puzzle, then I can put the 2 and 2 together like this. You see that? Okay, this is not a very good analogy, but you get it. And then still, after resolving another problem set, so on and so forth, the latest component of the chain might be this. So you would add on more blocks to the chain on a basis of your solving very, very complex mathematical puzzles and algorithmic challenges. But in order to solve these challenges, right, one needs power. One needs also, computers and processing capacities that frankly aren't available to people like myself, because it's very expensive and it's increasingly too costly and draining in terms of the computational energy required, right? So in order to offset that deadweight loss or that loss that deters folks from engaging in generating or producing new nodules for the chain, this is why some folks came up with the idea of cryptocurrency, that for each block or each minor block you contribute towards that chain, you get some cryptocurrency back as a reward, as an honorarium, like a speaker fee, if you will, or like a cracking the code fee, okay? And cryptocurrency itself is generated, and minted through blockchain technology, which is how we get, therefore, a self-sustaining ecosystem. But at the end of the day, blockchain is applicable to a wide range of spheres, not just the financial or the currency even, to the political, to the governance, to public health. In fact, the My Sajelastra app that I'm using right now, I know I butchered the pronunciation, they're terribly sorry, in Malaysia, which is the Malaysian version of Anxin Chuxia, or the Malaysian version of Tiankangma, employs blockchain technology too. But it's not crypto in the sense that it's not, it doesn't use cryptocurrency or crypto finance, nor is it anonymized. It's just quite literally a blockchain-based Web 3.0 product, so to speak. So blockchain is vast. It is a vast terrain. It is like effectively the soil on which many flowers can grow. 100 flowers can bloom, for those of you who would like some historical references, 百花齐放. But and on the other hand, cryptocurrencies is a very specific and particular plot, of this vast terrain that we see out there. And it is on that basis that we can then delve into what cryptocurrency is. The undergirding feature of all cryptocurrencies, at least in a way they should be called, is that they are anonymous and decentralized. So that is why, digital currencies, digital versions of existing central bank currencies like RMB, digital USD, etc., they're not crypto. I repeat, they're not crypto. They're not crypto because eponymously, they are not encrypted in a way that protects or anonymizes the identities of the users. They are traceable. They are traceable and regulatable by a centralized authority, right? 顾名思义，加密货币的意思就是说是加密的，是匿名的，是没办法去找到或者去监管那个就是身份的。如果是一个有方法去，就是要求你要必须登记才能去使用这个货币的话，那这个就并非加密了。所以呢，电子货币与加密货币有一个根本性的区别 ，right? And the fundamental difference there lies in essentially is anonymity and decentralization total, or is it partial, or is it non-existent? And there are many different kinds of cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin, not just Dogecoin, which is 狗狗币啊，就是那个狗狗的模样的那个货币。There's also Ethereum, Solana. And then increasingly, there's a new basket or type of coins or cryptocurrency called stable coins. What are stable coins? Stable coins are effectively quasi-cryptocurrency that's pegged to stable fiat currencies. And in the case of stable coin, it's the US dollar to which it's most tethered. So essentially, you see it as an extension and offshoot of the US dollar, even though, of course, it is not endorsed by or run or printed or whatever by the Fed. But it is correlated with the decisions of the Fed in virtue of its being pegged to USD, so to speak. So I hope I've outlined the conceptual fundamentals of what blockchain and what crypto is. And now what I want to do is to outline, of course, my thoughts on the topics I'm supposed to discuss today, e.g. cryptocurrency and geopolitics. But before that, I'm aware that, these are all pretty nascent new terms and concepts. And I just want to see, are there any questions at this point concerning what cryptocurrency and more broadly speaking, I guess, blockchain technology is? Any questions? Mary, would you, perhaps you might have some questions on behalf of the audience as well. So I'd be very happy to answer them.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Is there anyone have questions? Well, this is a very new topic for me. I'm sorry, I have to admit that, but that's very interesting. Looking forward to the next part of your presentation.
Can I put forward a first question?
Yes. Hi, KK. Hello.
Yeah. I understand the Chinese government is introducing some form of digital currency. I forgot the name anyway. So this is not a so-called cryptocurrency, I suppose.
Yeah.
But how would it affect the prospect of cryptocurrency?
Excellent question. So in fact,
is the government trying to suppress cryptocurrency? I have bought some cryptocurrency myself, so I'm much concerned. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, KK. That's a great question. In fact, I'm going to get onto that in roughly 10 minutes or so, because that is point number 1, 2, 3 under my sort of 5 topics to talk about under the geopolitics framework. So I'm going to answer that in detail, but the short answer is you're absolutely right. So digital RMB, or indeed more broadly speaking, any and all what we call CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies, they are not crypto unless the central bank says, you know what, I'm going to set up this currency and then I'm going to crypto it. I'm going to decentralize it, devolve the control and cede it over to you. Unless they do that, then it is not crypto. And more broadly speaking, I do think that Beijing, that is the monetary authorities in Beijing, are wary of crypto's rise, precisely because not only does it want to promote, right, its own digital currency, there's also general skepticism and wariness, which is not unfounded towards the advent of cryptocurrency, whether it be because of the financial security and liabilities accrued as a result of the instability of the market, or indeed the fact that cryptocurrency has often been employed, especially looking at the sort of the untouchable triangle in Southeast Asia between Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand, to empower, to fund criminal activities and elements that have posed massive headaches for the southwest border in China. So all in all, I can understand why Beijing is skeptical towards cryptocurrency. If I were them, I would be too. And I guess the short answer is yes, there's therefore this antipathy towards cryptocurrency within mainland China. But I also would add, and as I get onto that under topic number 4 in my sort of long list of topics to cover, that ultimately, whilst mainland China itself is averse towards cryptocurrency and Beijing wants that to remain the way, I don't think Beijing necessarily thinks that Hong Kong should follow its footsteps, in the sense that Hong Kong has always been given substantially more leeway to pursue liberated and opened up crypto policies, and had up until roughly 2019 or so, thanks to the chaos that broke out in the city, well, amongst other factors. Between 2013 to 2019, Hong Kong had been the golden hub for crypto in Asia, where Singapore, frankly, had no chance, nothing against us, right? There was no chance Singapore could have overtaken us in terms of the crypto viability and also hospitality. So that's my short answer. The long answer is on its way. I also see a hand from Colin. Yes. Hi, Colin. Hello.
Hi, Brian. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, yes.
Okay. I think you have a very good explanation, example of paper and currency, describe blockchain and Bitcoin. I also heard people talk about blockchain is nothing but an accounting system. It's a legend. It's an accounting book. So the tools can be used for other than Bitcoin. But the question I have is that how is the value of the Bitcoin come from? Why is it have a relationship to the legal currency? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, what generated value and what make the value goes up and down like crazy, and why people are still trusting it? I think it's important for people to understand how it works, so they understand the risk. Everybody knows it's very risky. I bought some Bitcoin at $3,000 US dollars, and it went up to 60,000, and now it's down to 30,000. So it's a roller coaster.
That's a great question, Colin. So this is actually a really good question that allows me to sort of just spend a bit more time on the, I guess, the mechanics or the financial mechanics of crypto before moving on to the geopolitics. So the first observation I'll make is that crypto, as with most sort of, I guess, technologically demanding assets out there, has pretty high, but not exclusive, but high barriers to entry when it comes to creation. So unlike the Fed, which can get away with printing money non-stop, QE, crypto is different. You know, that is, yeah, crypto is ultimately generated only by those who can mint the coins. And in order to mint the coins, you need vast, huge computers with ability to solve complex algorithmic puzzles. And that is why a lot of the earliest advocates and staunchest defendants of crypto say, you want to beat inflation, you don't trust the Fed, we don't either. Join us in the crypto world, right? Let's use crypto to beat inflation. Okay, in Cantonese, we call this 保值嘅嚇，即係人哋不斷印銀紙，咁我哋點樣去捍衛自己嘅權利咧？咁啊當然咧就透過呢個咩 crypto 啦，係嘛？如果唔係，我哋就會跟住呢個美國佬，即係跟住呢個美國嘅個金融政策咧，就不斷係要趕得上呢個通脹啦，就趕上通脹對啦。但係你如果要 beat inflation 嘅話，咁梗係要即係 try crypto instead. So that's the earliest sales pitch, right? They effectively say there's a limited amount of crypto that's minted each year, not because it's a quota, but because it's so hard. And therefore, it is scarce. Therefore, you know that you won't get an explosion in supply of cryptocurrency and coins and all that. So that's the first observation. The second observation is because of that, and on that basis, more and more what we call crypto non-native, or rather non-producers. So basically those who want to, you know, MIGA, who want to own crypto but can't mint or don't know how to mint crypto, they flood into the market too because they see this as a good sort of, you know, beat the inflation tool or asset of investment. And that is when the second wave of speculation-induced demand kicked in. This was roughly 7 years ago, where everyone was talking about crypto, even folks that were like, you know, had no clue what technology undergirding crypto looked like. They were still like, yes, let's do crypto. So they all ran in for the crypto wave. And then the third wave, or the third reason why it started accumulating serious traction, was because crypto drew the attention of very prominent investors, the sort of Warren Buffett's, not Warren Buffett himself, but Warren Buffett's of crypto world, like Sam Bankman-Fried, who's a fantastic guy, a fascinating guy, a 29-year-old. I think he's currently in amongst the top 30 wealthiest men in the world as a 29 or 30-year-old. He used to live in Hong Kong until 1.5 years ago, when he felt that Hong Kong was no longer a crypto-friendly environment and left for the Bahamas, which understandably is a much nicer location for crypto. We'll get into that in a second. But the gist here is there are multiple waves and multiple factors that contribute towards a sort of, you know, optimism and ascent of, to paraphrase Niall Ferguson, the ascent of crypto. But here's the thing, as you very much correctly noted just then, right, Colin, there's fluctuations. And then these fluctuations arise due to several factors. Some of them are more conventional than others. So one element is just the belief that the value of crypto would fall, right? So once you pass the bubble, it goes boom. And then, you know, the house of cards in the eyes of some comes crashing down. In the eyes of others, it's a natural reset and readjustment, right? So you never know who's right, who's wrong. I'm a firm believer in buying the dip, but that's an aside. But anyhow, right, those who are cynical about crypto who would say, well, you look at what happened with the .com bubble, right, in the early 2000s. You look at what happened with the 2008, 2007 subprime mortgage, and then subsequently 2015 Chinese stock market crash, and also the sort of disastrous wipeout of assets. Each and every time it's about the realization that the bubble is nearing bursting, and then someone burst it, pierced it, right? And then boom, it just went. So that's one theory explaining or accounting for the recent rout in crypto. Whereas my view is more neutral. I tend to think that, you know, as Buffett says, right, when the tide recedes, right, when the tide recedes, that's when you know who's wearing pants and who isn't. 潮水退了以后，你才知道谁穿裤子，谁没穿裤子。And the reality is the recent rout, so to speak, in the crypto market has helped weed out, in my view, a lot of investors that may not necessarily be suited to the high risk and high volatility environment of cryptocurrencies, or some cryptocurrencies. That's not to say it's justified. That's not to say don't sympathize with those who have had their savings wiped out and affected. Indeed, I was also personally, you know, very much lamenting the fact that I didn't warn more folks to get out. For full disclosure, I do not own a single dime of cryptocurrency. And the reason for that is because I am just personally a very risk-averse investor. It doesn't mean I don't believe in it. It just means I just don't want to invest in it. But with all that said, that personal disclosure aside, I suspect that's the first factor, right? The bubble piercing, the sense that this overarching tide of optimism and tide of exuberance is finally exhausted or has expired. That's one view. Another view still, though, is that maybe it's about these currencies not being sufficiently, tethered or connected in a value. So if you look at stable coins, that's basically quasi-tethered to the USD unofficially anyway, and also other tethered coins that have connections with fiat currencies that are parts or members of the reserve currency basket in the IMF, they're far more stable. And they're far stabler eponymously because of the connections. So if you want to opt for security and therefore sort of reduced chances of high rewards and huge rewards, they could be the ones, or they could be the currencies into which you offer in a crypto world. Whereas on the other hand, you have the likes of Ethereum, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Fitcoin, whatever you call it. These are all currency types that are likely to be more volatile because of the relative independence, right? That the price of freedom, or the price of anonymized and decentralized freedom, so to speak, is the likelihood of the currency to suddenly go boom as a result of commodity-esque or commodity-style shocks and externalities and exogenous factors that are beyond the control of market players. So that's the second observation I'll make. Hashtag not all are volatile, and hashtag not all are insecure necessarily, but it's definitely a trade-off between stability and the possibility for substantial payoffs and dividends. The final comment, though, is about market expectations. So a recent report published actually found a correlation to exist between the performances of non-stable coin crypto and the US dollar at large, or indeed not just the US dollar, but also US stock markets actually. And then they were like, why is that the case? Why is there a correlation between the stock markets and cryptocurrencies' performances? And there are four possible hypotheses. I'm just recalling this from memory, so bear with me if this is a tad inaccurate. The first is the view that increasingly a lot of tech companies and startups are paying their employees in the form of dividends or dividends through cryptocurrency. So when dividends are nice and when they go up, of course, and when everyone's doing well on NASDAQ and whatnot, the dividends are handsome. And the correlation is that, crypto becomes in high demand as a means of paying off employees, but also as a means for employees to further speculate as they enter into the market, so on and so forth. But if the market's doing terribly, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get payoffs or dividends or salaries or wages in the form of crypto, and therefore the demand for it correspondingly collapses. So that's one possible hypothesis. And that hypothesis, is that when people try and assign an expected value to crypto, right, they often look at the stock market for reference, right? Because ultimately, as we all know, the crypto market is quite opaque. You and I look at it, you're like, well, what is it going to look like in 2 years' time? I don't know. Maybe it's 35,000, maybe it's 25,000, maybe it's 5,000. But what we can reliably say is we think NASDAQ and also S&P 500, so on and so forth, they are rising, or they're falling. So what investors often do, especially lay investors in information non-transparent or information constricted environments, is they use existing financial market signals as a means of approximating, the value and prices, so to speak, of cryptocurrency in a week, 2 weeks, so on and so forth's time, in order to get through to the expected value and to maximize their, future dividends and whatnot. So I think that's another hypothesis, so to speak. The third hypothesis, though, is fundamentally market appetite and confidence is a composite concept, right? And when people decide if they want to invest, how much they want to invest, they will look at the investments holistically, right? So this is a classic sort of, that kind of pessimism, or 有人買我又買喎，你又買樓，我又買股票啦，咁啊恆指一定會飆升啦，咁呢個係一個所謂嘅，就是說一個市場定律上的一種，也可以說是非理智的一个挂钩现象，就是在我们的主观意志里面，我们认为就是那个股市的表现跟那个加密货币跟其他那个资产的那个表现呢是有一个挂钩 ，even though there isn't, and because we believe in that correlation, we therefore give rise to the correlation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the final factor, of course, is regulatory risk and policy risk. 政策风险, right? So when China announced in early 2010s that it was going to regulate crypto, no one took it seriously because they thought, it's going to be another classic, back then at least, a classic regulation that's rolled out with no follow-through action. So it's just there, right? 就是说名义上是存在，实际上是没有的啊，是一个空壳而已。But as we all know, under President Xi's leadership, he means it. When he wants to regulate something, he regulates it hard. When he wants to fix something, he fixes it within a month or actually 2 weeks, right? That's how President Xi does things. Like him, dislike him, he's very, 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 very efficient. So in 2017, when China passed a law that basically restricted the creation and the minting of cryptocurrency and also constricted the flows of cryptocurrency within China, there was an almost total whiteout of the crypto scene in China, say from a few exchanges that operated offshores, right? So, when China claimed that they wanted to do something and insisted they would do something in a modern era, that meant that thing would occur. But that also engendered substantial systemic and policy risk and volatility in 2017. The market had a rout in reaction to the news and announcement from Beijing then. And then the question is, given all of these factors, right, at the end of the day, is crypto more or less reliable as an asset than the many other assets into which we invest? Look, here's the thing. As much as there are, these factors and causes of innate instability and uncertainty in crypto, as much as I'm wary of the potential high-risk environment in crypto, I don't actually think crypto is all the more particularly high risk as compared or juxtaposed with other forms of financial instruments of investments that are not, of course, just depositing money into piggy bank or your own bank, right? Like if you engage in leveraging, okay, that's risky. If you purchase warrants and derivatives, that's risky. If you go for CDOs, that's risky. If you try and employ sort of what we call secondary and tertiary products to rebrand and also collectivize and distribute debt and whatnot, that's also risky. Everything is risky in life, as with a box of chocolates, if all of it is just milk chocolate, you wouldn't like it very much. I like my chocolate spicy, and that's why I like chili chocolate. So yes, there are risks, but I don't think these risks are so prohibitively, compounding and problematic that we wouldn't consider trying out the currency for once, even though, of course, I say that, and then as a risk-averse person myself, I also have other decisions and judgment calls, but I don't think it's hypocrisy or hypocritical. It's not hypocritical to say we have different preferences. Your risk aversion or your risk preference might be higher than mine because you're wealthier than me, because you're younger than me, because you're older than me, because you're happier than me. I don't know, right? Risk aversion and risk adoption or embracing are matters of subjective preferences. I may not agree with your decision, but I'll defend to my death your right to exercise your decisional authority. Anyway, I digress. I realize I spent 15 minutes on a very interesting question, which has meant I went down a rabbit hole in lieu of talking about the topic today. So I must apologize for doing so, and that was completely improvised. But with that said, let's talk about geopolitics, as I'm sure everyone wants to sort of just wants us to focus on this. So I'm just going to sketch out the 5 themes I'm going to cover in my geopolitics presentation right now. Let's see if I can share screen. I can indeed share screen. So the 5 topics I'd like to chat about are effectively, firstly, can crypto provide, let's try this again. Can crypto provide an alternative unit of exchange and storage of value? Okay, the 2 functions, so to speak, of of currency, of value. Let's see, there we go. Okay, second question. Can crypto provide countries, NGOs, and Quangos with a means of wealth appreciation? Third question. Is crypto a safe basis for accounting? And how do we balance benefits versus rewards? Fourthly, interactions with central banks. So what is the relationship between cryptocurrency and what we call CBDCs, so central bank digital coins? And finally, okay, just very briefly and quickly, where lies the future of crypto, and a bit more on the work that I'm doing. Hi, Kenneth, is that a question? No? Okay, great. I guess I like hands too. Do raise hands. I'm just gonna, Okay. So these are the 5 topics I want to cover. And feel free to ask questions on each of them as opposed to waiting to the very end. I prefer interactive sessions as opposed to yours truly droning on and on and on and on and on. You know, that's definitely not something I would enjoy doing very much, even though I do that with my students sometimes, much to the chagrin. So I want to just start by talking about, can crypto provide an alternative unit of exchange and storage of value? Context number 1, Ukraine war or Russian war in Ukraine. And the financial sanctions and the fallout in the aftermath of it obviously have alerted many countries in the world to A, the prospects of financial systems being weaponized to achieve or strike or score geopolitical goals, and 2, the vulnerability really of this so-called interconnected financial system of mutual interdependence. I was in fact the other day interviewing Nazir Razak, who was the brother of Najib Razak and the son of, okay, you can't see this, let me just fix it, of the second prime minister of Malaysia. And he told me that what he felt was happening, there we go, was that there was a risk that fundamentally there's too much financial integration and interconnectivity. That means that ultimately there's a dissolution of borders, okay, of financial borders or fiscal borders that straddle or that should be dividing countries and economies, but instead have collapsed as a result of over-integration and over-globalization. The upshot is a world where there's seeming mutual interdependence, even though, as we've seen through the Ukraine war, such interdependence is more fleeting and also mercurial than we think it is. The third observation about the Ukraine war, though, is that fundamentally the importance of finding alternatives for clearing, for exchange, for storing value, and also distributing resources and dividends has never been, so important in terms of the search for it, right? In light of the fact that indeed Russia's being kicked out of SWIFT and yet still being able to rely upon CIPS has allowed it or extended to it a lifeline that it would not have had there not been for CIPS to some extent. So all of this is to say that crypto seems to be then in light of this context, but also the previous context that we can look at, such as, of course, 2008 financial crises, the challenges to American dollar supremacy, the reforms to World Bank and IMF and whatnot under the rise of China. All of these are the contextual factors that give rise to one very specific question: can crypto do it? And I've been asked this question many times. Okay, I've been asked this in Oxford on a panel in Wadham College. I've been asked this when presenting on essentially Web 3.0 and virtual reality for very strangely a talk show actually in Hong Kong. I've been asked all sorts of questions, and here's my overarching answer, which you might find stultifying or mundane, but this is it. It's too early to tell. It's too early to say. I can't possibly conclude, if crypto could provide an alternative unit, simply cause 3 things. 1, I don't see enough upkeep and uptake by national governments. And 2, I don't see folks switching actively from the mainstream currency of storage and also exchange that we see right now in the world to crypto, at least not en masse. And thirdly, to justify, or for a country to take up crypto as the major or primary unit of clearing, there's a lot of political risk involved. I'll talk about that in light of the context of El Salvador under question number 2 later on. But for question number 1, the gist here is crypto could, I guess, down the road, down the line, 20 years, 30 years from now, maybe provide an alternative unit of sort of reserve currency for the world. But as of now, it's too premature. It's not premature because of the technology being premature, but it's premature because I don't think people are ready for it just yet. The psychology, the mindset, the mentality, folks aren't ready for it just yet. And will crypto therefore upend American dollar supremacy and imperialism and whatever you call it? Here's the thing, right? It is one thing to say that what's occurred in relation to the war in Ukraine has alerted folks to rethink the implications of over-reliance upon US dollar. That's premise 1, okay? But to move from that to saying, therefore, premise 2, people would ditch the USD. To premise 3, people would ditch it in favor of other currencies, blah, 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 blah. To premise 4, therefore, crypto is the answer. These are 4 premises. I can accept premise 1 without buying into premises 2, 3, 4. I can buy premises 1 and 2 without accepting 3 and 4. I can even grant 1, 2, 3 without therefore granting 4, right? To say that 1, 2, 3 entail 4 is like saying, well, we don't like this political leader, so anyone would do A, B, something. But as we know, reality and history doesn't work out that way. You can't just go out there and say, I don't want this leader. Let's get in someone. Oh, actually, it's worse. Look at Theresa May. The Brits thought they didn't want Theresa May. They got Boris Johnson. And what has Boris Johnson's done for Britain over the past few years? I don't know, apart from Partygate, drinking, and also trying to hire his own, I guess, wife now for his office. I don't see any constructive contributions by Boris Johnson, right? So be careful what you wish for. Just because the US dollar is not suited does not necessarily mean or automatically mean that people will or people should indeed see alternatives like crypto as more palatable. And even more generally speaking, as for the question of whether or not we think the US dollar is on decline, yes, it might be on decline among certain countries and economies that are wary of engaging in transactions exclusively in that said currency. But that does not therefore mean, in my view, that, for instance, the RMB or the euro or the pound would supplant the US dollars. To me, I don't think the GBP has any chance of replacing USD. I think GBP circulation, the pound that is, the pound circulation is on decline. Then you might say, oh, what about the Japanese yen or indeed the RMB? Possible, but remember the juxtaposition here, right, between over 53% of the world's transactions, I believe 2 years ago, was done in USD, whereas only 2.4 or 2.5% was conducted in RMB. Now, what we need to do, ideally, from an empirical standpoint, is to look at whether or not the percentage and proportion of trade and deals made in RMB or conducted in RMB has increased over the past year in light of, or past 6 months, in light of, the sanctions that kicked in place or came into place in the aftermath of the war in Ukraine's outbreak. But that's study has yet to be conducted. And that's why I think it's really important for us not to overread into certain phenomena and over extrapolate trends from that. And that is the RMB, right? Let alone cryptocurrency, which is far less accepted, far less embraced, and is not, unlike the RMB, backed by a strong and ascendant economy, even albeit with some headwinds along the way. So the observation I'll make there is crypto may in 20 years' time, be able to provide a way out for those who are sick of these so-called IMF engendered financial hegemony. But for now, the jury's still out on this one, but I think it's too early to tell and too early to therefore conclude. In Chinese, we have a phrase for this: 我们不应该在就是没有足够的证据情况底下，就是盖棺定论。这个并非一个明智的选择，并非一个明智的一个立场or line to take, so to speak. So that's comment number one. I'd welcome any and all thoughts, by the way, from folks, from all of you, on this and other topics later on. I'm going to open myself up to questions after the next topic. So I'm going to do 2 topics in one go. So with that said, that's the storage of value question, war in Ukraine, sanctions, all of that covered. Second question, can crypto provide actors with another means of appreciating or gaining wealth? Okay. This is, again, a very interesting question because it depends. It depends on if you as a national government or as a banking authority or as an investment fund have enough access to alternative sources of investment. In my view, there always are alternatives, right? You don't need to be a Temasek or HKMA or, one of these top tier investment authorities and monetary authorities in order to be able to dabble and to engage with assets and investments that are safe. But with that said, some countries obviously like to take risks. Some countries like to cause insurrections within their own borders. And then still some countries like to invest in currencies that frankly their leaders like, but their people don't. So El Salvador is a classic case of this, where I think around 10 months ago, the news that the El Salvador president basically opted to invest vast swathes of his country's monetary reserves into cryptocurrency, to exchange it into crypto. It was all over the news. People were like, this is the next crypto nation. He's a visionary. He's someone who believes in, crypto, and very clearly he's done very well for El Salvador, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, the rout hit around 3 months ago, and now El Salvador is on the brink of declaring some sort of, economic crisis and Armageddon. Still not as bad as the unfortunate situation unraveling right now before our eyes in Sri Lanka, where obviously there's a forex exchange crisis and debt crisis and the double whammy of that in Sri Lanka. But in El Salvador, let's just say things aren't looking too pretty or rosy as of today. And this is not to say, by the way, folks that crypto can't provide a means of wealth appreciation. It can in the sense that it is new, it is nascent, and if you buy the dip, you buy low, you sell high, you win, right? In Chinese, there's a phrase called 波段投资法. I'm also a firm advocate and believer in that. I've also been talking about how you can employ 波段投资法 as youth and as youngsters to create wealth for yourselves. But ultimately, what El Salvador did is, unfortunately, they reversed the 波段. They bought high, and now they're forced to sell low or wait it out, right? And that is the risk and liability that exists when one sinks too much into cryptocurrency, or indeed any form of investment. And I wouldn't say this is because crypto is innately more risky, going back to what I said just then in a financial explanation, but that overexposure to a particular asset class is innately risky. If I put all of my savings in housing in Hong Kong during 2019, that'll be very sad. Boom, 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 many explosions and sort of riotous arsenary later. Clearly, property wasn't rising during 2019. If I put all of my life savings into pounds, for instance, over the past, I guess, year or so, I would have had my net worth evaporate by 10%, 12%, because the pound slid versus the USD from 10.5 or something to now 9.4. It's atrocious. So it is not, I repeat, crypto itself that is innately uber risky. It is perhaps riskier, but it's not intolerably riskier than other asset classes. It is instead overexposure to crypto that would undermine a country's ability to genuinely profit and derive benefits from, that very process of, so to speak, wealth accruement and appreciation using crypto. And more generally speaking, can crypto be a source of investment and growth for other organizations, companies, NGOs, Congos? Absolutely. Yes, I think so, right? But again, all of this must be done with a caveat of minimizing overexposure and balanced and hedged exposure. If your portfolio comprises 50% crypto, I think that's too much. If it's comprising 1% crypto, I think that's fine. Look at me, I don't have any, right? But if it's sort of like anywhere in a ballpark of 1 to 10, I think that's a reasonable level of exposure. You need not worry, you need not panic. But if it's more than that, then I'd suggest you scale back a little. So as you can see, I'm a moderate and pragmatic investor. As with all of my advocacy in life in general, I tend to be quite moderate. And therefore, I genuinely think that it is your choice to make as to if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% or 10%. But more than that, be careful. Unless, of course, you have nothing to lose. But even then, still be careful. Yes. Okay. So I've effectively addressed, I think, these two questions in one go. I want to now open the floor up to questions, starting first with Mary. Do you have any questions on these first two topics? And does anyone else have any questions on these topics?
Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, yeah. Brian, please continue.
Moving on. So I've got two more questions to answer then. Firstly, is crypto a safe basis for accounting? Oh, hi, hello. That's a question from Mr. Kwon.
Please, Professor Kwon. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Kwon, hello.
Hi, Mr. Kwon. Professor Kwon, do you have any questions?
I can see a hand.
Yeah. I better speak in Cantonese because they involve some technology terms that I don't feel comfortable to use English 好啦，嗱咁咧我就唔係咩，我唔係乜嘢 question， 不過係幾個 comment， 從一個 technology 嘅人嘅角度嚟睇，就即係因為我係搞科學研究啦，咁樣樣我都接觸到啲啦。咁我覺得咧，其實成個 cryptocurrency 係從成個 domain chain 嗰度發展過嚟嘅，咁係由即係我以我 limit 嘅 knowledge 啦，咁開頭嘅 Satoshi 即係山本聰嗰度搞過嚟，其實最重要一樣嘢咧就係 decentralization， 我諗大家都明白呢個係呢個係最 fundamental。咁即係好似話有人學咗個少林武功用於善即善，用於惡則惡。咁 crypto 喺一方面就去咗呢個係 currency 嗰邊做，另外一邊咧亦都係搞緊呢個 industry 4.0。 嗰個都係搞 decentralization， 因為你一個譬如波音咁幾百萬個零件咁樣你用咗 centralized database 做唔到嘅。咁但係我哋喺個 crypto 嗰邊咧，我即係冷眼旁觀咧就有啲 comment 啊，因為我接觸好多國內嘅研究生喺香港讀研究嘅時候咧，佢哋都話佢哋喺好早期就因為佢哋喺美國嘅朋友就即係慫恿佢之下咧就去買，咁早買嗰啲就賺大錢，遲買嗰啲咧就蝕翻轉頭。咁所以喺呢度咧，我有個 comment 咧 ，cryptocurrency 就好似一個有錢佬喺度自建賭場，自己建一個賭場，入到個賭場咧自己買籌碼，咁咧賭贏就佢立晒錢，賭輸咁啊你啲散戶輸晒錢，咁最後輸到去到一個階段，嗰個賭場咧突然間一次過話執咗個賭場，咁好多嗰啲乜狗跑狗幣咧係咪輸晒？咁呢個我又想 comment 一下。咁第三樣嘢咧係更係重要，從一個科學研究人嘅角度嚟睇啊，因為而家係用緊成個 technology 咧係 base 上一啲係暫時都唔係非常成熟嘅 technology。其實嘅兩樣嘢，一樣咧就係 mathematically 嗰個 cryptography 呢個密碼學，究竟去到今天係咪解唔解到咧？呢個係好重要。因為我覺得，如果係以國內最近我睇啲書講，有一個軍事嗰邊嘅一個女博士，咁啊攞到咗國際大獎，就話已經係將一啲原本以為係嗰啲非常複雜嘅 encryption algorithm， 經佢手咧由幾個月幾年嘅咧縮到係一兩日，咁佢當然係軍事嚟做啦。咁但係佢個 algorithm就嚟咗一個顛覆嘅效果，就係將好多外國嘅crypto 嘅algorithm 咧，都突然間產生一個基礎上嘅危機。咁但係如果喺 cryptocurrency 入邊有人能夠諗到一個辦法，可以將 crypto 嗰條方面嚟逆向咗咧，咁你就大件事啦。你任何一個 cryptocoin 佢調翻嚟逆向就揾到出嚟，咁你做到嘢。咁第二咧就係有一啲嘢咧，你睇唔到嘅，譬如 quantum computing。點解 quantum computing 咁迷人咧？入邊嘅理論我唔想講啦。咁但係咧就係話佢 base 上一啲我見唔到嘅叫 qubit 嘅嘢。譬如你一個我用開嘅 bit 就係1同0兩個 state， 咁就計一個 algorithm 可能計係要幾百萬年先計到。咁所以你覺得我個 cryptocurrency 嗰個 algorithm 係啱嘅，唔使驚你破我。點知咧？而家有啲理論上佢 qubit 去到幾千粒，咁原本一啲 algorithm 平無嘅 algorithm 要解幾千年先解到嘅，喺 crypto 喺呢個quantum 呢個 quantum computing 嘅水平之下，或者將來有 quantum computing 嘅 hardware 上邊能夠係幾分鐘就解到，咁你根本成個制度散咗。咁所以咧就係我有啲感覺咧就係好似我哋標緊一個皇宮，標緊一個好美麗嘅 infrastructure 喺個 desert 喺個沙漠上邊，個 fundamental 係唔穩嘅。突然間有而家睇到好似穩，但係有一個風嚟一場雨嚟咧，成個沙坐咗落去嘅。咁點樣咧？咁第四樣咧就頭先講啦，好似國內而家策略係點咧？有啲好似係即係開頭就放任政策俾你玩下，等大家科學家同埋人民群眾都可以掌握呢隻科技，但係玩下發覺咧係嘥錢燒電，咁所以咧就連賭場都就埋唔準玩。咁但係咧喺理論個層面咧，啲科學家就不斷去精進。咁我想大家 comment 一下，即係我曾經講過笑話啦，即係呢種方法喺某啲嚟講咧就係話，一方面咧你想人學，但係咧你又驚人學咗之後輸咗錢，呢個唔知點樣。我講係咁多。
好多謝呢位老師嘅分享啦。咁我先回應咗呢位老師嘅觀點，跟住我就想邀請阿 Frank 都嚟問下問題。不過我先回應下就係阿 Professor 你嘅講法。我諗我逐點回應啦。第一樣嘢就係話個風險咧是否存在 as a result of 呢個所謂嘅 reversal encryption 咧。Without going into too much details， 我係同意有呢個風險 in terms of Bitcoin 同埋 to some extent actually Ethereum。 都有嘅。但係咧，如果你睇下 Solana 咧，同埋一啲比較所謂嘅 Generation 2嘅 coins 咧，佢哋係有一啲所謂嘅anti-reversal technology and safety installed， 有啲 safeguards 係 fundamental 其實專處理你所講嘅呢個問題，即係唔係話呢個問題唔存在啊，但係話呢個問題就係其實即係所謂嘅魔高一丈道高一尺，或者 vice versa 道高一尺，魔高一丈啦。咁我哋希望嘅就係道係高過魔啦，因為始終即係人間正道是滄桑啊嘛。But in this case, right， 我哋可以 argue 嘅就係當然 cryptocurrency 佢哋啲 investors 啊，佢哋嘅 creators 咪唔知呢個風險，而如果呢個風險真係 materialize 嘅話，其實係好大鑊嘅喎，即係佢哋一夜之間係冇人會買嘅喎，全部都係即係大幅拋售啊，跟住就係會 mass exit。所以 in order to keep the story and fable going 咧，係有 incentive 有誘因同埋有呢個能力，亦都希望去 safeguard 呢啲 currencies against 所謂嘅 reversal hacking, which is a possibility, and I think you're absolutely right, but it's perhaps a possibility that can be mitigated in terms of the fallout and also consequences. 第二點就係話我哋國家嘅 regulatory 政策咧，你留意到無論係話賭場啦，即係澳門嘅賭博業啦，定係 crypto 嘅 regulation 咧，喺過呢2年嚟，我哋以人民為中心嗰種嘅管治哲學底下咧，其實係中國係實行咗一個 increasingly 係以保險穩陣同埋 minimize 所謂市民嘅財富啊或者精神上嘅損失為呢個首要目標嘅 regulatory regime， 所以無論係賭博業又好、電子賭博業又好，甚至加密貨幣都好咧，中國嘅採取嘅立場都係雷厲風行地以人民嘅即係 risk aversion and risk averse sort of approach to economic and fiduciary interests 為個 guiding principle. So I don't think we disagree there. Thirdly, going back to the point you say about 一個所謂嘅 Ponzi scheme-esque 嘅一個 approach to cryptocurrency, where those who mint coins would create the market, right, in order to feed themselves. Again, that's a possibility, and that's very fair. Although what I will say is I think this applies to all investment products. 即係縱觀全球所有嘅金融市場裏面有好多啲咁嘅資產啊產品咧，其實都係同樣嘅邏輯，就係話我整咗呢個 derivative， 呢個 accumulator， 你買唔買啊？你唔買就好蝕嘅咯，你一定要買嘅，你係咪先？買揀埋睇 ，come over，let's get it， you don't want to lose out on it。咁其實你睇啲投資產品啊、保險產物啊、mortgage 啊、樓啊、所謂在議案嘅樓啊，其實呢啲種種嘅投資產品咧，都係用翻我哋香港政府嗰個廣告咁講，就係樣樣投資產品都有其風險，投資者咧必須要小心去篩選同埋衡量自己嘅風險得失。就好似如果咪就好似奪命金裏面嘅蘇杏璇咁咧，就俾人哋呃咗去買嗰啲俾佢買嗰個咩嘅產品，跟住發現自己冇晒啲 savings， 咁啊好大鑊㗎啦。所以就千祈唔好似蘇杏璇姐姐喺呢個奪命金裏面咁嘅情況。呢樣嘢咧就 applies across both crypto and non-crypto spheres as well。然後最後一點就係 when you start off making the comment concerning sort of 好多人係即係所謂嘅一股熱血喺個腦裏面咧，即係拋頭流灑熱血咁衝入去買呢個 crypto 咧 ，yes that's a worry I have too。所以我頭先所講嘅就係話 filtering out or weeding out sort of those who are not necessarily well versed in crypto to ensure that only those who are prepared for the risk and the volatility stay in the market. I think that's a side benefit of essentially what we saw over the past 6 months, or past 3 months, where there was a rapid rout in lieu of a long bubble and a longer stagflation, right? I'd much rather see, and this is also a viewpoint that was shared by Sam Bankman-Fried, a rapid collapse of the market amongst those who are not prepared for the risks than a protracted and painful experience of effectively folks gradually coming to the realization that the crypto market is not for them. So these are my 5 responses to your very erudite and well-articulated points. Thank you so much, Professor. And I want to now call upon Frank to ask a question. Yes.
Yes, Brian, thanks for your presentation. And Dr. Lee, good to see you again. I'm in a busy travel in Changsha of Hunan province now. I believe as a new technology, blockchain has good future. As it's good for decentralization, good for preventing fake copies, it's trackable. But if we use this technology to issue currency, personally, I think unless it's supported by its central government, it can have a stable future. Otherwise, it's like a gamble. In China, I think it's not legal. Even in USA, I'm not sure whether it's legal, but in China, I know it's illegal. And many people, they involved in this kind of like ICO and made some problem. But in the future, yeah, I tried to ask Brian, so if a kind of cryptocurrency is supported by central government, then whether the different countries, they can just use their own cryptocurrency to exchange, to do international trade, to replace US dollars, whether it's possible, say Russia or Iran, since they have been put in sanction, right? They cannot use US dollars. They have been kicked out from the SWIFT system, right? Whether say if their central government, they issue their own cryptocurrency, and then they want to do trade with Europe or with China, whether they can use their own cryptocurrency to do their own trade, whether it's possible, and how many years this can become a stable exchange system. So that's what I try to learn from Brian. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your sharing. 就Frank 你说的非常的对，就是说在现在这个前提下呢，咱们国家就是对那个风险对那个个人用户所构成的那个可能的损失，也是就整体而言，那在咱们内地里面去沿用这个加密货币对我们控制那个资产，就是那个 capital controls and also capital entry and exit 等等方面所构成的庞大阻碍和障碍的，确实是让国家在这方面只有对 cryptocurrency 较为就是鲜明的排斥的回应。而我觉得这个排斥是完全是情有可原的，就是完全是可以理解的，对吧？就是管理大国要求就是要先稳住那个局势，稳住那个大局，才能去走出一个管理或者管制的道路来，就是我们特色的道路来。那这个我觉得是完全没问题的，所以呢，就我是很同意咱们国家对 cryptocurrency 现在那个取态。但是你刚才问的就是第二道问题就是政府呢，中央银行有没有那个可能性是利用那个加密货币去就是提供一个 alternative Okay, so I think we need to break this question down to two scenarios. Scenario number one, could countries use cryptocurrency via anonymous accounts to engage in capital transfers in light of sanctions and USD-based exclusion? And the question number two is, can central banks produce their own cryptocurrency? My answer to the first is yes, and my answer to the second is broadly no. And here's why. I'm going to go in reverse order because in reverse order because it makes sense in accordance with the questions here. Question number two there, or the second question, maps onto question number 4 on this list of 5 questions I'm going to ask, which is essentially what is the relationship between cryptocurrency and CBDC, central bank digital coins. Central bank digital coins are eponymously and innately non-crypto. Why? Because they are centralized, they are produced and minted by a named authority, and unless they, of course, have 拱手相让 and say, you can use it anonymously, we're not going to track and trace, chances are all CBDCs, and this applies not just to RMB, right? It also applies to digital USD and all of these other currencies that the West is seeking to digitalize. There's going to be some degree of 实名登记, registration, right? You can't just use the money without registering, or else it will become basically an officially endorsed version of money laundering technique and tactics. So essentially what we're seeing here is that in the case of CBDCs, it's non-crypto because you have the naming and the identification and also verification of identities involved. So the answer to the second question, or the second variant of the question you raised there, is a no. What about the first question? So I believe he's asked this question already, Xiao, so just letting you know. The first question you asked is it possible to create digital alternatives to USD? Oh, sorry, that's the second question. Is it possible to transact in crypto and use crypto to circumvent USD? In theory, yes, but I don't see why that is necessary when you have CIPS and other non-USD currents and units of exchange anyway. So in theory, they could, but it's very hard because you then have to go through 重重的障碍，就是以一个 individual 个体化的那个模式去做 transaction, and using crypto as the basis of transaction, you then shift the money from one end to the other. But how can you verify that? How can you record that, right? Unless you explicitly acknowledge on your 账户 that 有一个不明来历的 no one knows where the money came from, even though we know where the money came from, but in which case doesn't that defeat the whole point of cryptocurrency anyway? So it's a yes. but it's a caveated and reserved yes to your first variant of the question you put forth there. And that ties me on to topic number 4 as well, before moving on to finally accounting and safety and basis, all of that. More generally speaking, my view here is that cryptocurrency and CBDCs have a substitutive relationship. The more mature CBDCs are, okay, the less likely it is that cryptocurrency would take off amongst those who want to lean on the blockchain dimensions and elements of crypto for transaction. But for those who still want to retain the anonymity, the confidentiality, and the decentralization benefits, whether it be for ideological or practical reasons in relation to cryptocurrency, they are not going to drop crypto or Dogecoin, you know, or Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin, what have you, in favor of, you know, CBDC. So it's substitutive for some, but it's ultimately non-substitutive for others. Sorry, that's the correct stance I want to take there, right? And additionally, what does that mean in terms of countries' policies towards crypto? Well, for China, for whom developing digital RMB is a pivotal first step to supporting 这个就是内外大循环, right? And also having an offshore and onshore dichotomy and bifurcation in the digital currency they employ. For China, you know, developing a mature and well-accepted and well-adopted digital RMB is of utmost importance. And therefore, from their point of view, I don't think China or Beijing would soften up the restrictions upon crypto anytime soon. The real challenge or the real question here is, will the restrictions extend or be applied to Hong Kong as well? Now, remember, Hong Kong is a part of China, but Hong Kong is also a special administrative region. So my personal view is that ideally in Hong Kong, we shouldn't outlaw crypto, not because, you know, we are different from China and all of that. We are part of our motherland and our country, but because of that, we have an all the more duty to experiment and engage with reform-centered products and innovation. And that is where uniquely and distinctively, right, our ability to preserve cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency-centered products and to experiment with them could prove to be helpful to the PBOC's continued attempt to experiment with digital RMB and internationalization of RMB as a logical subsidiary and corollary to that very process. So all of this is to say that on question number 4, the relationship between crypto and CBDCs is rather complex, but it's also one that is, you know, partially substitutive, partially non-substitutive, and even at best, you know, at best of times, partially complementary in terms of the policy innovation and experimentation effects overall. Okay, final question to address then. Is crypto a safe basis for accounting? And how do we balance benefits versus rewards? And I'm inspired to talk about this because of the work of some of my friends who engage extensively in, you know, sort of questions of human rights activism, right? Can crypto be the savior that salvages or empowers human rights activists? The short answer from my end is no. I do not think that when it comes to human rights activists operating in Iran, operating in Myanmar, in Afghanistan today, I genuinely do not think that for these individuals, crypto is going to save them or salvage them from, you know, the excesses of authoritarian persecution and subjugation. I find the idea that crypto could be this liberating force and tool cute. It's a very cute idea, but I don't think it's a viable idea. It's like saying, oh, why don't all of you, you very poor people, learn how to engage in, you know, extensive philosophizing and writing books? Why don't you publish a book? If you're poor, write a book and get rich fast. It doesn't work that way, guys. You know, I think fundamentally the real barriers to entry and also to movement and to access to freedom for subjugated minority populations is not so much whether or not they can use crypto to engage in monetary transactions. It's the fact that they are under physical persecution, oppression, and incarceration by the relevant authorities in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Myanmar, under the Tatmadaw. These are all individuals and activists and journalists that are being hassled for whom they are and what they're doing, not because they're using crypto or not using crypto. So maybe using crypto helps them, maybe it doesn't. But fundamentally, to equate crypto with this sort of emancipatory tool, transforming and revolutionizing human rights, I find that cockwomble, to excuse my crass language, cockwomble, okay? I don't think it works that way. At the same time, there's also a further question of criminality, right? That as much as crypto is, you know, an emphatic tool that allows one to evade the central bank, beat inflation and all of that, it's also become a commonly preferred unit of exchange in a dark web, okay, in the deep web, not dark web, in the deep web, in problematic, faulty segments of the internet that, frankly, are beneficiaries of a system, or a monetary system rather, that would grant them impunity, right, and grant them some degree, and actually a high degree of evasion capacities vis-a-vis to regulatory authorities, so to speak. So in all honesty, what I would say here is, whether it be interactions on the dark web, or the actions of rogue governments, or indeed the behaviors of actors who want to operate financially with impunity, from all of these angles, crypto may not be a safe basis in terms of the security, risk, and liability it poses, but also in terms of, you're not being able to determine the origin and the nature of the user who's contributing towards your pocket or your wallet, so to speak, that sum that they've transferred to you. So crypto is safe insofar as you trust the person that's engaging in the interaction with you, and eponymously and definitionally, it's very hard to trust someone whom you do not know. With that said, does that therefore mean there's no way whatsoever of establishing the vendors' identities? No, right? So there are vendors that are increasingly sort of reintroducing second order and more refined authentication processes to ensure that it is them who are engaging in the transaction with the client. Okay, so the vendor client verification, P2P verification, is an add-on that has been slapped onto crypto exchanges and also crypto transactions in certain corners and segments of the market. But certainly it has yet to take prevalent effect across most of the market. And a balancing of benefits versus rewards then ultimately depends on three factors. Firstly, who are you and how prepared are you to weather the financial and non-financial risks associated with the employment of crypto? Secondly, to what extent is crypto the only source and the best source of exchange and means of exchange within a particular market segment you're looking at here? And thirdly, can the risk be offset through hedging or competing frameworks of reference and vice versa? So I'm not here to advocate for crypto full stop as a crypto optimist, nor am I here to say that I'm a crypto cynic. I believe I'm neither. I am what I would call a crypto pragmatist. I believe firmly in leveraging crypto and also crypto decentralized finance at large in doing good for society, but we must also be mindful of, without being excessively rosy-eyed and also bushy-eyed, about the possible fallout and the consequences of over-dependence upon crypto. I am a firm believer in blockchain's decentralizing prowess and tendencies to lift boats together. But that does not mean I'm therefore also oblivious. That does not therefore mean I'm oblivious to the possible externalities induced by such anonymity, decentralization, and innate resistance to regulation. I'm a firm believer that crypto can ultimately transform the lives of the poor and the middle class, but I'm not therefore against any and all regulation, especially by regimes and countries for whom there are strong reasons to prefer a risk-averse approach to crypto finance, such as our very own dear country, China. So all of this is to say that I have very mixed views about crypto, despite being someone who works in Web 3.0 and who works, in fact, at the intersection between geopolitical risk consultancy, public policy, and Web 3.0 innovation. And this is also, part of the work that I've been doing in my advisory group has been looking at introducing crypto exchanges to countries that I personally think would benefit from them, and lobbying and pushing for better amelioration of regulation in those contexts, without therefore accepting that I must advocate crypto, of course, in jurisdictions that have proven to be clearly reluctant to and resistant to introducing them. So for one, to be very clear, I will not, have not, do not advocate the introduction of legalization of cryptocurrency in mainland China. That is not what I advocate. I do not stand for that, but instead I have indeed done work in putting into contact and putting in touch crypto exchanges in Southeast Asia with leading countries in the Indian subcontinent. I won't name which of them, I won't name which provinces, but I certainly have been doing that over the past few months, for instance, as part of my portfolio. And another part of my portfolio is I work on a Web 3.0 startup that seeks to leverage NFTs in transforming the way we engage in speech and debate and discourse, in rebuilding, bridges across polarized and split communities, in empowering those without a voice to speak and be recognized and rewarded for what they do, and ultimately in giving leaders and thought intellectuals an alternative revenue stream. That's something I've been doing. We can talk about NFTs though, and what gives NFTs value on a separate day, because I fear I'm running out of time. But it is on that note, I want to say thank you all so much, and I look forward to any and all questions over the next 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you. Over to you, Mary. Sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for this wonderful presentation and speech. Professor Colin Tam just have a question that, am I correct that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency are now legal in Hong Kong?
The answer is it's not clear. No one knows. I hope the government can release under the very capable ministry, sorry, not ministry, under the very capable department and bureau, of course, that engages in financial regulation. I certainly hope that they would be able to release some guidelines under both HKMA and also actually the secretary, I believe the secretary for financial and also monetary, take it back, financial services and treasury would be responsible for this. So that's currently Christopher Hoy. Both MA and also the Secretary for Financial Services and Treasury, or rather the head of that bureau, are incredibly competent people. So I'm sure they'd be able to release some guidelines and protocols sometime soon. I have my utmost confidence in them as core pillars of our government, but also of our economy at large. So yes. Please stop sharing screen. Okay, I will stop sharing screen then. As you wish, Winston, as you wish.
Okay. Professor Colin Tan.
Brian, just a follow-up question. But my understanding is that, for example, in Causeway Bay, there are machines that you can still sell your Bitcoin and convert it into a legal currency, right? I mean, and so far, the Hong Kong government or the MA have not charged them, right, for conducting illegal financial transaction. Am I right on that?
So illegal currency in what sense?
Well, I mean, people still able to convert or sell or buy their Bitcoin in Hong Kong.
Yes, but that's not illegal per se, though. I guess, yeah. So you can convert them, but I don't think that's illegal.
Yeah, because if you are PRC citizens, right, owning a Bitcoin or trying to do transaction is actually prohibited according to PRC law.
Yes, so there's an ambiguity there as to whether or not the PRC laws apply exclusively to the mainland or also to SARs. I think that's where the legal gray zone kicks in. I don't think the current sort of version of the laws actually states or says explicitly sort of, you know, if it's legal or illegal for non-mainland, still PRC Hong Kong citizens to possess Bitcoin, that crypto at large. And that's also where the indeterminacy frustratingly exists. So I just hope there's some degree of legal clarity to be offered sometime soon, really, over this matter and subject. But full disclosure, again, you know, I'm not sorry. I'm not a legal expert, and I don't think I have COVID, so do not have COVID. So therefore, I would just say that is an area that I think requires more amendment and clarification from the relevant authorities. But I have utmost faith in Chris Hoy and also Eddie Yu to do the right thing, and I'm sure they will indeed balance all parties' interests under the framework of one country, two systems. Great. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you all so much for having me. It's Arthur. Yes. Hi, Arthur. Hello.
Yeah, maybe one last question for me. So I'm not really an expert in Web 3.0 and blockchain, but I have some interest in it. So I think I have 2 questions to you. For what I look at it, I did invest in some like crypto and stuff like that. And I did listen to like a lot of Twitter about the blockchain Web 3.0 development and DAOs. I think the first question is, if you look at blockchain and all the Ethereum, the community, one thing, do you think it's more like a besides, it's more like a political, how to say it, reform from, not reform, but these people like are suppressed by the reality, real world. So 起义, something like it. I'm not sure, is it like people like, especially for new generation of the people, they don't like what's going on in the real world. So it's more like a blockchain and these communities for them to be in a community, to be like a I don't want to use this word, but a 反清复明 or something like that, right? It's a political thing for them. And the second thing is, because I'm actually in China for like almost 10 years. And for what I've seen, I know some friends also doing like a crypto and also Web 3.0 investments and stuff like that. And I have some discussion with them. And it seems that most of these, the way how they make money is on how they produce new tokens. Like some of them is Ponzi schemes. I can't reject that, but so the way is, it seems that Web 3.0, a lot of people, there's not a definition for it right now and how it like how to be successful. So I just want to ask this question: how do you see it, given that you are working on that right now? So these are two questions. I'm not sure it's too clear or not, but yeah.
No, I think there's a lot of interesting thought to be unpacked there. I want to just delve into it sort of methodically, starting from the first point you raised concerning essentially, is there a political dimension to it? Look, I'm a firm believer in Judith Butler, and ultimately I think everything is political. Performativity itself is a political concept. The distribution of discourse and power and ideological verification and validation or delegitimation is political. Everything is political. I am political. The body is political. Our being here is a political moment. And therefore, on that basis, I'd say crypto is by definition political. It is also political because it is the antithesis towards the drive towards Leviathan, towards the centralizing tendencies of Leviathan dictating and determining the individual tendencies and choices that all of us may make. We shouldn't let them be susceptible to or subject to overregulation. So I think it is political. Is it therefore a revolutionary tool or tool for revolution? I think, again, the potential for that is overstated. I don't think it is. I don't think that on the minds of those involved in the Arab Spring, for instance, or as we always like to call it, the color revolutions in other countries, I don't think what they had on their mind was the currency of exchange between themselves. So I certainly don't think it is a tool that would foment revolutionary dissent or uprising, so to speak. But what I will say is, and this is quite important, if central banks do not take seriously the complaints of those who are buying into crypto seriously, if they think that eventually, they can win back the hearts and minds by doing nothing, I think the central banks would be very delusional in thinking that. So all in all, I do think that there is some degree of innate politicity. There's some degree of innately political tension within and embedded within the way crypto is designed and disseminated, but I wouldn't overstate its revolutionary or transformative potential. Ultimately, the tool is less important than the tool holder and the wielder of that particular tool. Second question then, on essentially, is it a Ponzi scheme? Is it over speculative? Is there an inflation of expectations? Look, going back to the question, so the question from Colin, I think a while back, and my answer to that is also my answer to this, which is, yeah, there's definitely going to be inflation of expectations. There's definitely a lack of so-called corporeal, right? Sort of the physical economy. So Li Daohui was talking about 德国模式, and essentially 道会教授 juxtaposed the real economy against 那个就实体经济 versus the virtual economy, 就虚拟经济. And he said, obviously there's a risk, right? If we stray too far from the 实体经济, then that would basically become the product or the produce, right? It will give rise to essentially bubbles that we cannot contain and may eventually burst, that unstable. But what I'll note there is the comments made about 实体经济 being very important apply not just to crypto. It applies to finance. It applies to secondary products built off mortgages. It applies to fintech. It applies to environment tech. It applies to all sorts of technology and innovation that ultimately does not have a real or physical basis or manifestation to track. So could it be a Ponzi scheme? I wouldn't go so far as to call crypto a Ponzi scheme. No, I would say it is a potentially high risk, high spread, product, just as many other financial products out there. Will I say put all of your savings into it? No, don't do that. But will I say therefore don't invest in it full stop? I also wouldn't recommend necessarily that sort of course of prescription. So with that said, I think those are great questions. Thank you very much for them. And I think we have time for one more. So Professor Kwan, hello.
OK 嗱，一個好短嘅 question 就係話咧，就而家我哋見到就係點樣一個首選啊，將呢個 cryptocurrency 同呢個實際 currency 拉上關係，等佢融入好嘅金融，即係好多大莊家都係咁諗。咁我想你 comment 一下，譬如好似最近啊 Elon Musk 咁樣咁做呢單嘢，佢買咗一啲，咁跟住咧就話佢將來賣嘅 Tesla 嘅車。你可以假設佢用7折俾現金，30% 係可以用 cryptocurrency。咁如果你俾 cryptocurrency 咧，佢就收你幾多個 bitcoin 咁樣。咁即係其實咧就係佢唔係話佢 legalize 佢，但係佢話我喺我自己間 Tesla 廠製造出嚟嘅 product， 我接受呢種favorable discount， 佢唔係 legalize 你。我想你 comment 一下，同埋呢種嘅情況未來會係點樣咧？即係話有啲大莊家自己買咗 currency， 然之後咧就利用呢個辦法咧就 legalize 佢，扯高佢。OK。
呢一個好複雜嘅問題，我諗個簡短答案就係兩樣嘢。第一就係你話呢個咁嘅 price gouging 或者所謂嘅我俗稱叫 cryptocurrency 版本嘅黃牛啦，即係黃牛式嘅經營模式咧，或者所謂嘅神藥黨嘅經營模式存唔存在咧？我覺得係有嘅，我呢個風險係有嘅，所以一定更加要監管咧。即係我最近同一啲朋友傾，即係唔係傾啦，即係倡議緊就係點樣喺印度推進呢個有效嘅 crypto finance regulation。其中一個我哋諗嘅嘢就係點樣去保障消費者嘅權益。咁因為我本身係有做政策研究，就係倡議關於即係印度當地嘅最高政府啊，佢哋嘅嗰個treasury 點樣去 handle 呢個 crypto 咧，我係有份去 draft 或者去 push forward 一啲 resolution 啊，一啲 lobbying 嘅ideas 俾我啲朋友啦。咁當然我唔係一個 lobbyist 啦，我亦都唔係一個 registered lobbyist in India， 我只不過 researcher。但我可以做嘅就係提供呢方面嘅建議。咁我諗呢方面嘅 consumer rights 保障係非常之有關重要，完全同意 Professor 你所講。但係 more generally speaking， 你話呢個即係 legal tender 同 crypto 之間嘅關係，你其實呢個就係一個 paradoxical 嘅地方，即係你越想掛鈎，就越有所謂嘅穩定感，同埋越有呢個咁嘅現實感啊嘛。但係你越掛鈎咧 ，crypto 嘅價值咧就越降低㗎啦。即係 crypto 價值咩？就係唔係實名啊嘛，係匿名啊嘛，係去中心化啊嘛，係冇現實嘅所謂嘅 base 咗嘅 correlation， 係唔會受中央銀行所監管啊嘛。所以 the more tethering there is 去 benefit 一啲，即係或者俾一啲人去謀取私利咧 ，the less likely it is that it will be crypto. It will just be，it will degenerate into what I call quasi cryptocurrency (QCC) instead of CC。咁呢個就係一個好值得探索嘅範疇。I wish we had more time today。所以就 on that note 啦 ，I will thank you very much, Professor。希望答到呢個問題咧，亦都好多謝大家今日請我嚟，唔介意我兩個人三語嘅所謂兩個人三語一個 presentation。Thank you so much。
我乜都唔識，不過咧就係即係有啲科技嘅觸覺啦，可以咁講。
你嘅觸覺係其他人嘅脈搏，所以你嘅觸覺係非常之好嘅。
Okay, anyone have other questions?
I'm fixing my Wi-Fi, so please bear with me. I'm just switching off my camera. I'll be done shortly. But if there are no further questions, thank you all so much for having me.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay,
Bye.
bye.